Flo and Guinness.
The AstraZeneca vaccine, once the most widely recommended inoculator against COVID-19 in the world, has been withdrawn from sale by a manufacturer who cites plunging demand as the main motivator. But it's more than a little curious that the withdrawal decision comes in the immediate aftermath of revelations in court documents that the AstraZeneca vaccine has been linked to the death of scores of people and the injuring of scores more others. The opposition spokesman on health, Dr. Alfred Dawes, joins me on the show this evening to explain just why the government cannot afford to stay silent amid these revelations. This is Lead Story on this Friday. Let's start the show. Good evening, welcome to Lead Story on this Friday. My name is George Davis. So as I told you at the top, Dr. Alfred Dawes, the opposition spokesman on health, is joining me. Later on, we're going to speak with Celia Barkley, the Information Commissioner, on a matter concerning the Data Protection Act. But health is where we jump off for the pivot point here on Lead Story on this Friday. And of course, it's in good taste for me to say welcome, Dr. Dawes, to the program.
Thanks for having me, and good evening to all the viewers.
Excellent. You took the AstraZeneca vaccine in 2021.
I did, and I had all my family members vaccinated, save for one holdout. And I actually was a part of the public-private partnership and operated a vaccination center at my office. So I am entrenched in the decision by the Ministry of Health to advocate for vaccines. I was a part of vaccination campaigns. However, there was a difference of opinion in terms of the approach to trying to get as many people vaccinated as possible.
You didn't agree with the mandatory aspect of it?
I did not agree with the mandatory aspect, and I didn't agree that people should be losing their jobs. I had to be writing letters to companies to allow for exemptions, and I felt that at some point when you knew that herd immunity was out the window, that you should stop telling people to get vaccinated to protect themselves and their loved ones. It was a personal decision. So
you accept, though, not to break your train of thought, but you accept that the experts, which you would number among, did not make their minds up on the likelihood of herd immunity happening until about the fourth COVID wave.
No, it wasn't the fourth COVID wave. By the time we had that Delta variant, when everybody was going in, we thought that it would have, it was a beta variant. And then by the time the Delta came around, what was, it was out. But then what we noticed that if you caught the disease after being vaccinated, your course in hospital would be much milder.
And long COVID would kick in.
Right. So there was still a pretty good reason, especially in the Delta wave. And we saw that's when a lot of people took the vaccines. And then we weren't really hearing much about side effects at that time. So we were still saying get the vaccines to protect yourselves. But then we still got the official narrative from the government talking about vax-only events and discriminating against the unvaccinated. And I didn't like that.
So just to be clear, it's not that you were against all forms of discrimination, because as an expert, you would accept that in a crisis such as that, there had to be some discrimination, but you didn't agree with the discrimination lending itself as far as to mandatory taking of the vaccine.
Well, what happened was that people would not allow unvaccinated people around them, in their houses. People would say that you can't come to work unless you took the shot because you're going to make them sick. But the truth is that the vaccines were not protecting you from getting sick. You could still get sick and not show any symptoms and pass it on. I.e., so the vaccinated could come to work and pass on the virus, the unvaccinated as well. So saying that if you're unvaccinated, you can't work, that was just wrong. It wasn't supported by the science.
Yes, set the context now, because the UK has about 65 million people. In the UK, court documents have revealed that AstraZeneca killed 81 people and injured about 100 more. About 50 families of those deceased have AstraZeneca in court, £100 million sterling lawsuit. So look at the population of the UK. They say that in and outside the UK, in the EU, AstraZeneca saved 6.5 million lives. That's the rough estimate. So they say, well, in that context, saving millions of lives, this number, and I hate to say small number when it refers to people dying, because one death is one death, yeah? Right. But they're saying that relative to the number of people who took the vaccine, cross-referenced against those who died, why is there so much alarm around the fatality rate of AstraZeneca? And I put that to you as a medical expert.
Because it has been so polarizing, and it goes back again to the approach that the authorities took. Because the anti-vaxxers and the moderates who supported vaccination, they now are able to say, see, we told you so, and they're going to be always looking for these side effects. And that is what happens. So if you're looking at medical treatments, what we call iatrogenic injury. In the US, iatrogenic injury, meaning that you go to the hospital and the drugs or the surgery goes bad or the treatment itself leads to death, and it's one of the leading causes of death in the United States. Mm-hmm. And you can look at that all around the world. We aren't really looking at iatrogenic causes of death as much here in Jamaica, but the truth is that no matter what the treatment is, there are going to be side effects. There are going to be deaths. But in this instance, because of the politics surrounding it and the divisions that were sowed by the authorities, not just here, but internationally, around who should get the vaccine and who want to be forced to get the vaccine, it is hyping up a lot of the side effects. And as you said, you know, every death is a tragedy. But if you look at the death rate for the vaccines versus other treatments, it would fall in, I guess, the lower band.
But I'd say to you as we go to the break, Dr. Dawes, that at no time in its narrative did any government, least of all the one that we have here, market the vaccine to potential recipients as perfect. So you know the science, you know that there's no, I don't know if there's any perfect remedy existing. There you go. So it never,
too much water will kill you.
There you go. So it never marketed AstraZeneca as being perfect and sans the kind of effects that would compromise health and well-being. So why is it causing consternation that it has found to have killed people and made some ill? I'll take that answer after the break. I'm up on it. My producer says I have to go. This is Lead Story. Segment 1 is done. We're talking about AstraZeneca, and we're building into why Dr. Dawes believes the Holness administration cannot afford to stay silent amid the revelations about AstraZeneca, which may or may not have prompted the withdrawal of that particular COVID vaccine from the market.
It's yummy time as we are celebrating our teachers all over Jamaica. It was all smiles for Principal Mikulski at Homewood Technical High in Manchester.
Big thanks to Yummy for the kind gestures being extended to us today.
Goshen Primary in the parish of St. Elizabeth, Principal Natalie Roper Allen was overwhelmed with emotion. Thank you, Yummy, for making me have a yummy Teacher's Day. At the Clarendon College, Principal David Wilson was honored.
Congratulations. Appreciate it, sir. This is a surprise.
Happy Teacher's Day from the Mandeville Agency.
Thank you, Yummy.
Chance here from outside! Raised ball into the middle, it's a free header, and it's a goal!
Welcome back to Lead Story here on CVM TV. My guest, the opposition spokesman on health, Dr. Alfred Dawes. We are speaking in the wake of the decision by AstraZeneca, well, the manufacturer of AstraZeneca, to pull the COVID vaccine from the market. It says officially that, look, we're doing this because of low sales. However, the decision comes days after documents tabled in court as part of evidence, lawsuit against AstraZeneca by victims of those who've died, said that, well, the documents showed that people died, scores of people died, 81 according to the court documents. Scores more suffered serious injuries, and families are seeking to recoup collectively about £100 million sterling from AstraZeneca. Dr. Dawes says, government here, you have to say something. And so the question I put to you before the break, Dr. Dawes, this government didn't. No government said it's perfect. So why is there consternation over the fact that AstraZeneca has proven fatal in the very rare minority of cases?
Well, when I issued my press release, it hadn't started as much. But you're seeing, as the news stories propagate online, the anti-vaxxers are claiming victory. And they're saying that we told you so, that the jab is a poison, and it was not from God, as was said by the PM. The doctors were wrong. We're a part of all the cover-ups. And so I saw this coming because of how things were. And it's exactly what's happening out there. When the pandemic was roaring and we saw all of those images out of Italy, New York, and so on, we were clamoring for vaccines.
Yes.
I remember the long lines stretching at the health centers. People just couldn't get enough vaccines. And we health professionals were saying the vaccines are safe.
I saw you encouraging parents to let their children take the vaccine.
I was even in ads.
Yes.
Because we had to get schools back home.
Yes.
We were out there and we were encouraging people to take the vaccine. We facilitated it. Other regular Jamaicans were encouraging others, be a vaccine or take the vaccines, because we saw what was happening. Now, with all of this coming out, of course, you can see, we had a low vaccine take-up overall, but now you're having everybody saying, yes, I told you so. And where is the Ministry of Health at a time like this? They have pretty much abrogated their responsibilities to all of those who assisted the public awareness campaign to try and get as many Jamaicans vaccinated as possible.
So do I hear you saying...
They can't leave us, dare I say, out there in the open for everyone to attack us and say that we were pushing a bad vaccine.
So do I hear you saying that perhaps it is the imperative for a response from the government is not so much about what has happened, but in the future, if there should be another event where vaccines are needed, you need to have a soothing statement now to give confidence to people that what the government says, you can believe it.
And I said that, the people want to know that they can trust their governments. And not only that, but you had the presidents of associations, you had prominent doctors, prominent health workers, nurses, everybody were trotted out. The private sector got on board. And everybody was saying, hey, let us unite as a country and see if we can get out of this, if we got, when it was a matter of herd immunity, let us get to herd immunity so that we can reopen our borders and life can go back to normal. But now, if another pandemic comes and the same set of influencers and thought leaders and scientists, experts, are going to be trotted out again, are they going to feel comfortable enough that the government is not going to hide behind them again, should what we are defending or promoting not turn out to be as golden as everyone was led to believe? And
perhaps there is... people are cottoning on to your perspective because of the fact that at the height of the pandemic, there were noted medical practitioners who were on the side of the conspiracy theorists. And this is what confused most people, because the doctor you trusted said, don't take the vaccine, it's poison. Another doctor that you've seen recently says, yes, take it, it's healthy. They see you in advertisements saying take it. They see you in newspaper articles saying, I took it and I'm looking forward to the second jab. So you're saying, amid all of that, it is necessary for thought leadership from our government.
You have to come out and clear. And again, all of that debate has been stirred up. And the most important opinion that we're leaving out now is the opinion of those who have taken the jab and they're wondering if long-term there's going to be an issue. Are they protected? Are they at risk for some event? And who is going to tell them now, reassuringly, that, you know, the time has passed really when you would have had these clots and so on. That's usually in the immune response in the first couple of days or weeks.
Yes.
Who is coming out and saying all of that? Because I'm being bombarded with calls right now.
Yes.
You know, messages, am I safe? How long before I'm no longer at risk?
Yes.
And it's a deafening silence.
Yes.
That's coming out of the Ministry of Health in terms of reassuring persons who have made the decision to take the job.
In the time we have left, I have to ask you, well, we have to invite you here for more fulsome conversation concerning the politics at the constituency level and other things. But quickly before you go, you've been saying that Cornwall Regional and the overspend, it's beyond, well, it's cause for serious concern. The health minister in his sectoral debate presentation said, look, the figure that the opposition has been banding, about 21 billion, it's not for Cornwall alone, but it's for regional, for health facilities rather, in that part of the island which have supported Cornwall when it wasn't able to cater to patients. How do you respond? You say you got your math wrong.
Well, first of all, we didn't pull that figure out of the air. That was what the Ministry of Finance sent out in their estimates of expenditures. So we got that figure from the Ministry of Finance. Now, if they're going to put everything together, we still have a lot of concern because that is a serious scope creep that you're talking about, to move from 4 billion to build a brand new second-hand hospital to now we're talking about 21 billion for that same brand new second-hand hospital. We still have a lot of concerns with the project management fees, the disregarding of the technical advice of many persons, even the local contractors who were blamed as saying that, you know, the local expertise didn't exist.
Guess what? We have to cut it here, but I have to invite you back. My producer is going to be with you to schedule something for you to come back and talk for the whole half an hour. That's the conversation with Dr. Alfred Dawes, the opposition spokesman on health. After the break, we'll talk with the Information Controller about the Data Protection Act. This is Lead Story.
Do with you? Come out this Saturday, May 11th, as the Palestine Solidarity Coalition for Recognizing Palestine hosts an open discussion on the situation and effects of what is happening in Palestine. This will be held at the University of the West Indies Department of Sociology, SR10, from 6 to 8 p.m. Students and the public are invited to attend. Don't miss out. Be there.
With a chance. Jamaica! Jamaicans draw first blood. Damari Gray scores! Mikel Antonio, and it's a goal!
And the Reggae Boys take the lead.
And Jamaica puts this one on ice.
CVM Television wishes to apologize to our viewers who were unable to watch live Premier League matches between Saturday, May 4 and Monday, May 6, 2024. Due to technical issues, CVM regrettably aired matches that had premiered earlier in the week. Rest assured that corrective measures are being taken to prevent a reoccurrence.
Welcome back to Lead Story. Now, there was an issue concerning an access to information request sent to Tax Administration Jamaica for information on the owners of two properties, one in Anota Bay, St. Mary, and the other in Mandeville, Manchester. The ATI request was met by the Tax Administration Jamaica, TAJ, which said, unfortunately, it could not provide that information, and it cited the Data Protection Act, the DPA. Now, members of the opposition are up in arms because they're wondering, how is it that the Data Protection Act and the provisions thereof could stand in the way of the public wanting information about the operation of a public body? We're turning to a lady who holds an office that is not well, it's not an old office, it's very new, still very new. Many people would struggle to name the office, but Celia Barkley is already making an impression as the island's Information Commissioner, and we've invited her here to address that issue. Good evening, Ms. Barkley.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So you heard me set up the issue earlier. can the Data Protection Act be used to block access to information requests?
Well, I think the first thing persons would need to understand is what the Data Protection Act is and what it protects. If you don't understand that, then there's room for a lot of confusion. So the Data Protection Act was passed to ensure that personal data in the protection of any data controller, which is any person or entity, even a public sector entity that is being processed, is protected throughout the lifetime of that data. But there is a very specific definition that is given in the Act for personal data, and so you have to read the Act and apply it within the context of that definition. And when you look at how the Act defines personal data, it speaks to information that relates first and foremost to individuals. It is really not personal data even if it is specific to a corporate entity or a non-natural person.
Yes.
But as it relates to the individual, then even if that person is deceased for over 30 years, the Act requires that there be certain protections in place for that information.
Yes.
Now, provided that the information relates to an individual, a natural being, living or deceased within 30 years, then the question arises as to whether that information that is being processed makes the individual identifiable, whether by itself or in conjunction with other data that may be in the possession of the controller, or even if it relates to a matter of opinion or an intention to take a decision towards the individual. So the Act is very specific in terms of the information that it covers and protects. And it's not every information that is considered private is covered and protected by the Data Protection Act. So that's the first thing that persons need to appreciate.
Yes.
So we know that persons who are doing business from time to time like to keep certain aspects of their business confidential for various reasons. As it relates to, for example, the financial affairs or the operations of companies, corporate entities, partnerships, firms, and other forms of business, the Act really does not protect that information insofar as it relates to the business. So the Act is very specific to its application and how it defines personal data, and that is how we must first lay the foundation when we're looking at what the Act touches and concerns.
Yes. So the issue then, oh, well, all right, I hear you on that. So where the Act concerns information about the name of a person that is connected to a public entity, or a person who gets collects taxpayers' money in furtherance of their personal enterprise. In other words, they're paid out of the public purse. When information about such an individual is requested, does the Data Protection Act also put restrictions on how much information can be given about such individuals?
Well, what the Data Protection Act does is to impose certain standards on how information is processed. So, for example, while there is no express prohibition to say X information or Y information cannot be disclosed, the Act does impose certain conditions as to how and when you process information, including its disclosure. And the considerations will vary depending on what the facts and circumstances are. So, for example, in any given case, you would have to look at not just the nature of the information that is requested, but why is the information held, how it is being processed. You have to look at whether or not there are any applicable provisions that limit the disclosure of the information. But at the same time, the Data Protection Act does not exist in isolation.
Yes.
Because we know that there are other legislation under which entities operate. And so within certain limits, because there are some exceptions that are provided by the Act, entities have to balance interests as between compliance with the Data Protection Act and meeting their obligations under any other legislation. So, for example, you had mentioned the Access to Information Act. Now, that Act allows persons to request information or certain types of information, again, from public entities. And if it is that a request falls within that particular act, it is not necessarily excluded or prohibited just by virtue of the Data Protection Act. So sometimes it's a matter of persons advising themselves as to what is it they require, from whom, and for what purpose, and the appropriate legislation under which certain requests can be made.
Yes. And just before we get to the issue of the data control, and we don't have much time, but I have to ask because I know people may be wondering, if a request comes to, say, for something under the ATI, the Access to Information Act, but as you've explained, the request is not directed in the right direction and there is not clarity in the request to actually provide what is requested under ATI, but it may be under the Data Protection Act if the application is made there. Does the architecture allow for guidance to be given to the individual requesting the information about how to make the request and where to make the request to?
Well, let us just first point out that, generally speaking, when it comes to a request for personal data, the Data Protection Act does provide for access rights of the individuals to whom the data relates. And so it is the subject of the personal data who may in various ways exercise an access to that information. As it relates to third parties, then different things would apply. Now, where a data controller receives a request from any person as to information to be provided, they will first have to assess the nature of the request to see whether or not the information, the request itself is coming in under or by virtue of any act. And yes, it would be within their power and discretion to provide guidance where they believe a request is not properly made. Yes. There's nothing that prohibits them from doing so.
Yes, Ms. Barkley, the time is too short, though the interview is sweet. We're going to see if we can get you back here one evening, perhaps even in studio with us. We'll give you advance notice and we can wade further into these very important issues. Thank you for your time this evening.
You're welcome.
That's Celia Barkley. She is the Information Commissioner. So here we go. Where the AstraZeneca COVID vaccine is concerned, as I give my take, I think it's necessary too for the government to issue a statement because, as Dr. Dawes has said, there is a lot of gloating going on in the social media space from those conspiracy theorists and those anti-vaxxers. And I wouldn't be minded to call on the government to say